When you look at writing, you may think you want to look at that in a history class. You may look at literature in an English class. But when you look at writing, it really shows a lot of what the viewpoints are of a particular era. So we're taking a look at two very famous forms of medieval writing, the works by Dante and Geoffrey Chaucer. Two very, very different types of works, but two which display a lot of the values that are important to those living in the medieval, basically this kind of getting into the later medieval ages, and what they hold as important. Two very, very different writers, but two huge contributors. We're going to start off with Dante's, I don't want to call it a book, it's technically a poem, Dante's Divine Comedy. Now there's Dante right there, good looking chap, and Dante was an Italian poet who wrote the Divine Comedy, and the Divine Comedy is just a very unique contribution to Western literature. What it is an epic poem, so it tells a story, when they an epic poem like a Beowulf or the Odyssey. So it tells a story, and it's composed into three parts. It's very parallel in its structure. It will tell the story, it's essentially an allegory of somebody going to hell, purgatory, and paradise, or heaven. Within these different levels of hell, as Dante's traveling, he's actually a character within his own book. He's going to see different people who are judged essentially according to their deeds, whether they've done something good or bad. And if you've done something good or bad, then you will be placed in eternal life within one of these different levels. What's unique about this particular poem? As I stated on the last slide, it's told in first person. So it's actually Dante himself says, I am doing these things. And if you're going to go to heaven, hell, and purgatory, you might want someone to guide you. It's a little creepy to do that. And he invents two different guides, or imagines them going and taking them around there. Now, one of them he had never met, but that's Virgil, the old Roman poet who wrote the Aeneid. Okay, very famous. He's like the Roman version of Homer. And he actually takes, Virgil guides him through hell and purgatory. And he actually goes, and in paradise, he has this woman, this ideal woman named Beatrice. And Beatrice goes and guides him through paradise. And she's so beautiful, so he's going to associate heaven with her. And more or less, what this is, it can be interpreted on the most basic level. If you're just going to look at the plot line, it looks like a story of somebody who went to hell and back, essentially. But on a much deeper level, it's really an allegory about how someone reaches God, and it has a lot of medieval themes and symbols, and it's just one of the known as the great works of Western literature. So within the different layers, the three layers, it's a parallel structure of having 9 different levels. And so when you go to hell, when Dante goes to hell, within these different levels, people are punished according to their deeds. And you can take a moment here to pause and just take a look at these different kind of punishments, sins, and then their punishments. Now, all these other ones are interesting, fun, and all, but the big one to know is the 9th circle of hell. The traitors, the people who have committed treachery, according to Dante, are the worst. And the worst traitors of all time are going to be Brutus, Cassius, and Judas himself, along with Satan. And the way they are described is they're basically being tortured in hell. And famously, Satan is portrayed as being trapped in the ice up to his chest. And when you think hell, you tend to think hot, but Dante goes the other way and creates this kind of the idea of a cold hell, which goes against kind of the commonly held belief. So it's kind of an interesting way that he imagines, extreme pain and suffering. And the idea here is that, sin needs to be rejected, and that all these people are going to be, they're punished for what they did. The famous, kind of display here, you can see Dante and Virgil, and then here's Satan trapped in the ice, going, and he's chomping down on those 3 traitors, those 3 awful men. Then once they get up from hell, then they go to purgatory. Purgatory is like Neutralville or Limbo or whatever you want to call it. It's not exactly heaven. It's not exactly a place you would want to live either. But these are the people who aren't, I guess, as bad as the people who are in hell. The way paradise is perceived, rather than being 9 terraces, is 9 concentric circles or spheres around the earth. And then when Dante goes through these different levels, he sees all these people that are good people. So they're named after essentially the planets, and then these are like the warriors of fate. These are the people that you would see that have done good things in their lives. And even it gets to the outside level, and he says it's so beautiful I can't even describe it. So it's one of those things I can talk about the Divine Comedy, but it's much better to go and actually read it and begin analyzing it and trying to figure out what the heck is going on in that story. Very, very famous story, Dante's Inferno. That concept, or the idea of circles of hell, those are just kind of prevalent in our modern day. Kind of, you'll hear those references being brought up. And then moving on to a very, very different type of story. Kind of, I guess, is in some senses a story you're probably more familiar with, or a style, is Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. Now, Canterbury had become a point of pilgrimage. People would go and visit Canterbury Cathedral because Thomas Becket had been murdered there, and he was a martyr, and people saw him as a saint, and they wanted to pay respects. So what Chaucer does is he writes a story. This is completely fictitious, and he writes this story that basically goes and shows all these different people traveling from London to Canterbury. So they'll make the description, and here's the wife of Bath, and here's her story. Here's the partner, and here's the story. Here's the priest, and here's the story. So you have all these different groups, low, middle, high class, and then they tell a story in order to kind of kill the time. And in class we took a look at 2 of the different stories. I'm not going to give you the detail of the partner's tale or the wife of Bath, but both of those stories are once you read those, you get a good sense of what the Canterbury Tales are about. And they're just they provide a big insight into what's important. They're actually very humorous. They're written in Old English, which I don't recommend trying to read because it's pretty difficult to do unless you know exactly what you're doing. But very, very interesting kind of way to look at the world, and a good reflection of medieval society. Because as I said, the literature does reflect a lot of the values that society had as well.